What happens when some of the most groundbreaking films of their time come up against a rapidly shrinking box office? Well, you get a year like 1996. With all of its contradictions, wins, and struggles. On the surface, 1996 looks like a great year in cinema history. Over 12 films earned more than $100 million, the horror genre was revived, and massive franchises like Mission Impossible were launched. Actors were earning more than ever, and the success of the previous years led to an increasing number of films being produced. But that was part of the issue. The industry was growing, but it was growing too fast. Audiences couldn't keep up with all the new releases, and with the Summer Olympics drawing people away, and major stars like Jim Carrey being paid previously unheard of sums, Hollywood was spending money faster than people were buying tickets. Despite all of this, 1996 was a memorable year in cinema history. It gave us timeless hits such as Fargo, Scream, and Trainspotting, as well as some cult classics like Mars Attacks and From Dusk Till Dawn. In this video, we'll dive into why 1996 was a transitional year in film history that changed everything. We'll break down its biggest successes and most surprising flops month by month, starting with January. January started off with Robert Rodriguez and Quentin Tarantino's From Dusk Till Dawn. This vampire film starred Tarantino himself alongside George Clooney in one of his first major movie roles. Initially, From Dusk Till Dawn received mixed reviews. Everyone agreed that it was well made, but the sudden genre switch and the sheer amount of violence were too much for some audience members to handle, at least at first. The film eventually found its audience and became a huge cult classic, spawning several sequels and even a video game. But perhaps the biggest event of the month was the 12th Sundance Film Festival. One of the things people don't realize about 1996 is that it was a big year for independent cinema. Moviegoers were slowly getting tired of blockbusters, and some turned to smaller movies with more heart and creativity. One of the films that premiered at Sundance was Scott Hicks' Shine, which was based on the life of the pianist David Helfgott. Shine dealt with topics such as mental health, childhood trauma, and the power of music. It spoke to people so much that it even earned several Oscar nominations.
Shine, Jane Scott.
With Jeffrey Rush winning Best Actor.
Jeffrey Rush and Shine.
Another film that premiered at Sundance was Big Night, starring Stanley Tucci, who also co-directed the film with Campbell Scott. This film was nominated for the Grand Jury Prize Dramatic, but unfortunately, it didn't secure the win, which went to another movie instead, namely Welcome to the Dollhouse. Welcome to the Dollhouse technically premiered in 1995, but it received its followers in 1996 at Sundance. This film had a relatively low budget, but that didn't stop it from stealing all of the attention. Famous critic Roger Ebert was a huge fan of this movie. He even included it in his Best of 1996 list, giving it the number 5 spot. That is a huge achievement, especially considering just how many great movies came out in 1996. After the success that was January, February started off on a much more somber note.
Gene Kelly, dancer, singer, choreographer, director, and star of some of the great movie musicals of all time, died today at home in Beverly Hills.
On February 2nd, Gene Kelly sadly passed away. Kelly was a big musical star, known for his roles in Singing in the Rain, For Me and My Gal, and An American in Paris. In 1952, he was awarded the Academy Honorary Award because of how versatile a performer he was. His dance moves and choreography will forever be iconic, and he'll always be one of the biggest names from the golden age of cinema.
Come on with the rain, I've a smile on my face.
Luckily, February also brought some good news. Just 2 weeks later, August premiered in Norway, with other premieres coming just a couple of months later. This film was Anthony Hopkins' first time directing a feature film with a full cast. He also starred in the movie alongside Leslie Phillips, Kate Burton, and Rhys Ifans in his film debut. There were a couple of other debuts and milestones that happened in February. Bottle Rocket was Wes Anderson's feature film directorial debut. The movie was based on a previous short Anderson made, and it also featured the first ever acting performances by Luke and Owen Wilson. However, none of these films were the film of February 1996. That spot has to go to the Scottish black comedy drama Trainspotting, which was directed by Danny Boyle and based on a novel by Irvine Welsh. Trainspotting starred the likes of Ewan McGregor, Robert Carlyle, Ewan Bremner, Kevin McKidd, Johnny Lee Miller, and Kelly MacDonald in her on-screen debut. It explored themes of addiction, poverty, and life in Edinburgh. The film managed to be honest, dark, and witty all at the same time, rightfully earning its place as one of the defining films of the 1990s. The film would eventually receive a sequel in 2017, T2 Trainspotting, which also won the critics' and fans' approval. But Trainspotting wasn't the only 1996 comedy tackling difficult topics. March brought us another memorable film that made people laugh and think at the same time. On March 8th, Mike Nichols's The Birdcage came out. The film starred the iconic Robin Williams, as well as Nathan Lane, Gene Hackman, and Diane Wiest. Williams and Lane played a gay couple involved in drag culture who had to pretend to be a traditional family in front of the straight conservative couple played by Hackman and Wiest. Similar to Trainspotting, The Birdcage tackled political topics in a witty way, but where Trainspotting was dark and realistic, The Birdcage was light and heartwarming. It was also praised for portraying a gay couple in a positive light, which was, at the time, still pretty rare in Hollywood. March also brought along the 68th Academy Awards, which celebrated the many great films released in 1995. The ceremony saw the return of Whoopi Goldberg as the host. She first hosted the awards in 1994, when she became the first woman and the first African American to host the awards on her own.
So, do you miss me?
To this day, she's considered one of the most iconic Oscar hosts, alongside the likes of Bob Hope and Billy Crystal. The biggest success of the night had to be Braveheart, with 10 nominations and 5 wins.
Braveheart.
Including Best Picture and Best Directing for Mel Gibson. Apollo 13 was close behind, earning 9 nominations and 2 wins.
Apollo 13.
This year also saw the first and only Best Actor and Best Actress wins for Nicolas Cage
Nicolas Cage.
and Susan Sarandon,
and Dead Man Walking.
who won for their movies Leaving Las Vegas and Dead Man Walking, respectively. But as much as March was a month of celebration, April brought along some serious controversies. Marlon Brando was a successful award-winning actor who left a lasting mark on Hollywood. But in the last 2 decades of his life, Brando went from one controversy to another. And that's exactly what happened in April of 1996. On April 6th, Brando went on Larry King Live and made some pretty polarizing remarks. He claimed that Jewish people controlled Hollywood, which most people agreed was an anti-Semitic thing to say.
Are you critical of the Hollywood that makes violence?
I think that I'm angry with some of the Jews. I'm very goddamn angry at some of the Jews. Hollywood is run by Jews. It's owned by Jews. And they should have a greater sensitivity about the issue of people who are suffering.
What's more, he also spouted some other problematic things, including several racial slurs. When Larry King tried to confront him, Brando claimed that he was actually thankful for Jewish people, refusing to engage with the accusations of anti-Semitism. This wouldn't be the first or the last thing that Brando would get criticized for. Many also took issue with his questionable treatment of women, as well as his frequent public outbursts. But the 1996 comments were definitely one of his more controversial moments. April wasn't just full of controversy, though. Gregory Hoblet's Primal Fear came out this month. It starred Richard Gere, Laura Linney, Frances McDormand, and Edward Norton. This was actually Norton's film debut, and it was a big one. His performance made him a standout, and he even received an Academy Award nomination for Best Supporting Actor. Primal Fear quickly launched him into stardom and led him to securing roles in movies such as American History X and Fight Club. However, while April did manage to cause a little bit of a stir, it was May that took the world of cinema by storm. May was the month we got to see some of the highest-grossing movies of the year. Twister was one of those movies. It came out on May 10th and quickly caught the eye of many cinemagoers. Its use of CGI was hugely impressive. and is likely what led to it earning $495,700,000 at the box office, making it the second highest grossing film of 1996. Disaster films were becoming very popular this year, and Twister was one of the most successful installments in this genre. Its portrayal of dangerous tornadoes felt both realistic and absolutely terrifying, and audiences couldn't get enough of it. But Twister wasn't the only impressive film of the month, far from it actually. Between May 9th and the 20th, the Cannes Film Festival took place, and it was one of the biggest years in the festival's history. For starters, Francis Ford Coppola himself was the jury president for the main competition, and he had a tough job to do. The 1996 entries were an unusually strong bunch. The festival opened with the film Ridicule and closed with Flirting with Disaster. Both films were well received, but they were largely overshadowed by some of the other pieces, including the Coens' Fargo. It quickly became one of the most popular releases of the year, and it was nominated for the Palme d'Or as well as the Festival Directorial Award, which Joel Coen actually won. The year after, Fargo would also receive several Academy Award nominations.
The Oscar goes to Frances McDormand in Fargo!
With McDormand getting the win for Best Actress,
Ethan and Joel Coen for Fargo.
and the Coens earning the Best Original Screenplay Award. But Fargo wasn't the only Cannes Film Festival success. The actual winner of the Palme d'Or became Mike Leigh's Secrets and Lies, which focused on dysfunctional family dynamics. The film's cast included Brenda Blethyn and Marianne Jean-Baptiste, who both received Academy Award nominations for their acting performances. Kansas City was another hit at Cannes this year. Other popular films shown at the festival this year included the French comedy drama Irma Vep and Trainspotting, which was actually shown outside of the competition due to its subject. But even though Trainspotting was deemed too extreme to compete, another controversial film was rewarded for its boldness. David Cronenberg's Crash was definitely an original film, but not everyone was a fan of its portrayal of graphic violence and eroticism. Despite some of the film's vocal critics, Crash was actually awarded the Special Jury Prize, even though Coppola himself admitted that not every member of the jury was on board with this decision. Another film that received an award at the festival was Breaking the Waves, which was directed by Dogma 95 founder Lars von Trier. It starred Stellan Skarsgård and Emily Watson in her feature film debut. Watson was so good in the film that she actually earned an Academy Award nomination, and to this day, Breaking the Waves is considered one of von Trier's best films. May quickly became a busy month in cinema, but it wasn't quite over yet. 2 days after Cannes ended, another major hit came out. Mission Impossible premiered on May 22nd and impressed the audience so much that it became the third highest grossing film of the year, earning $457,696,359 at the box office. The film was directed by Brian De Palma and starred Tom Cruise. It was suspenseful, full of impressive stunts, and it became so popular that it launched a massive franchise that still has a massive audience to this day. The most recent, and possible final installment, came out just earlier this year in May of 2025. Now, even though May 1996 was incredibly stacked, the Hollywood machine was not about to slow down. The summer was here, and June ended up being just as, if not more busy than May. On June 7th, an adaptation of Jane Austen's Emma premiered at the Seattle International Film Festival. This film followed the Jane Austen movie craze of 1995, which included films such as Sense and Sensibility, Persuasion, and Clueless, the modern take on Emma. This period romantic comedy starred Gwyneth Paltrow, Jeremy Northam, Ewan McGregor, Toni Collette, and Alan Cumming. It received positive reviews overall, and it even earned some Academy Award nominations,
Rachel Portman for Emma.
winning in the Best Original Music or Comedy Score category. But Emma wasn't the only film to premiere on June 7th. Michael Bay's The Rock came out on the same day, and it became the fourth highest grossing film of the year. It was yet another action movie that had the audience mesmerized. Many consider it to be one of Michael Bay's best films, with Sean Connery, Nicolas Cage, and Ed Harris's incredible chemistry really elevating it. Unfortunately, June wasn't the most consistent month in terms of movie quality. While Jim Carrey was at the height of his fame, his latest film didn't exactly impress many of his fans. The Cable Guy, directed by Ben Stiller, was a controversial film. Carrey was paid a whopping $20 million for his role in the movie, but this wasn't enough to save it. The character that he played was much darker than his usual roles, and this shift proved to be too much at the time. The Cable Guy was criticized for going too far, and it severely underperformed at the box office. Over time, opinions have somewhat changed on the movie. Nowadays, it's considered a cult classic, with many feeling that it was underappreciated when it first came out. Now, that may be true, but the fact remains that back in 1996, people thought of Jim Carrey as the family-friendly funny man. The Cable Guy was too unsettling in comparison, and the shock of this prevented it from going further at the time. Luckily, the kids had another movie they could go to this summer. On June 19th, The Hunchback of Notre Dame came out. It premiered at the Superdome in New Orleans, and the event was attended by around 65,000 people. While it didn't quite reach the success of the likes of The Little Mermaid, Beauty and the Beast, and The Lion King, The Hunchback of Notre Dame still did pretty well. It earned $325,338,851 at the box office and became the 5th highest-grossing film of the year. Disney took a big swing with this one, focusing on more adult themes like prejudice, religion, and lust, which was a daring move that many appreciated. Just 6 days later, another movie came out, and it became the biggest film of the year. Independence Day premiered on June 25th, and it was the blockbuster of the summer of 1996. It became the highest-grossing movie of the year, earning $817,400,891. Just like Twister, Independence Day was a disaster movie with impressive special effects, including the iconic destruction of the White House. It depicted a massive alien invasion, and it did it so well that it easily cemented its spot among all-time sci-fi classics. June ended with another bang, this time in the form of Eddie Murphy's The Nutty Professor. This comedy was genuinely hilarious, and Murphy's performance as several different characters was a particular standout. The Nutty Professor ended up being the 8th highest-grossing film of the year, and it also won an Academy Award for its impressive makeup effects and prosthetics. The summer was hardly over, though. Let's take a look at some of the movies of July 1996. Harriet the Spy became the first feature film by Nickelodeon. This was a children's spy comedy drama that launched the career of the young Michelle Trachtenberg, who won a Young Artist Award for her performance in the movie. Harriet the Spy was actually an adaptation of a novel by the same name, but it wasn't the only adaptation that came out this month. On July 24th, Joel Schumacher's A Time to Kill premiered. The film was based on a John Grisham novel, and it starred Matthew McConaughey, Samuel L. Jackson, and Sandra Bullock. The movie did a pretty good job at the box office, but the reviews were pretty mixed. Audiences didn't dislike A Time to Kill, but they didn't exactly love it either. It was a well-liked piece with strong acting performances, but it was far from the biggest hit of the year. Overall, July wasn't the strongest month in 1996 cinema, so the question was, could August pick up the pace again? Similar to July, August kicked off with a family film based on a popular children's book. Matilda, directed by Danny DeVito, premiered on August 2nd. While today, many think of the film as a classic, back in 1996, it had a relatively slow start. It didn't do super well at the box office, and only gained more traction once it was available on home video. But why was this the case? Why was the summer so slow in the world of cinema? Well, one of the potential culprits was the 1996 Summer Olympics, which took place in Atlanta, Georgia. So, from July 19th to August 4th, American audiences were largely focused on this massive sporting event, and they likely had less time to go to the movies. Still, even after the Olympics came to an end, the film industry wasn't quite fully back. On August 28th, The Portrait of a Lady came out. The film was directed by Jane Campion and starred Nicole Kidman, Christian Bale, Richard E. Grant, Barbara Hershey, John Malkovich, and others. While this film did receive 2 Oscar nominations the following year, including one for Hershey, it got pretty mixed reviews and didn't win over that many people. Critics called it pretentious and indulgent and pointed to some of Campion's shortcomings as a director. But the month wasn't over yet. On the last day of August, Bound came out. Bound was the directorial debut of the Wachowskis, who would later go on to make The Matrix. The film wasn't afraid to make some bold choices. It prominently featured lesbian characters and several intimate scenes, as well as some depiction of violence. While there were those who criticized these aspects of the film, overall, Bound received positive reviews. With time, it even became a cult classic among the LGBTQ+ community. Bound wrapped up the month of August, ending on a high note. But no one could have expected the tragedy that September 1996 would bring. September started off relatively well, with Philip Goodhue's directorial debut, Intimate Relations. The film starred Julie Walters, Rupert Graves, and Nicholas Hoult in his own film debut. Now, while the movie mostly received mixed reviews, it did kickstart the career of one of the biggest Hollywood stars of today. This month also gave us The First Wives Club, starring Bette Midler, Diane Keaton, and Goldie Hawn.
You don't own me. Don't try to change me in any way.
At the same time, pretty much no one expected this comedy film to do as well as it did. The First Wives Club grossed $181 million worldwide. It received an Academy Award nomination for Best Original Music Score, and eventually developed a strong cult following among middle-aged women and the LGBTQ+ community. Sadly, both of these movies were largely overshadowed by the tragedy that shook the whole world. On September 7th, Tupac Shakur was shot 4 times in a drive-by in Nevada. 6 days later, on September 13th, he lost his life. The terrible incident remained a mystery for many years to come, with many still spreading conspiracy theories about who was involved to this day. Tupac was largely known as a rapper, but he was an accomplished actor as well. His appearances in Poetic Justice, Juice, and Above the Rim were all highly praised. To this day, many believed that Tupac had real talent that could have led him to becoming one of the best actors of his generation. Sadly, his life was cut short, and we'll never know what might have been. The second half of the 90s was filled with teen remakes of classic literature. In 1995, we got Clueless, a remake of Austen's Emma. Later in 1999, we'd get She's All That, a modern version of George Bernard Shaw's Pygmalion, as well as 10 Things I Hate About You, inspired by Shakespeare's comedy called The Taming of the Shrew. Another film that could be considered part of this trend is Baz Luhrmann's Romeo plus Juliet, which came out on October 27, 1996. This movie is a modern adaptation of the classic Shakespeare tragedy, though it's somewhat different from the previously mentioned films. Unlike movies such as Clueless, Romeo plus Juliet still used Shakespearean language despite the modernization of the material. The film is an interesting piece that many consider a must-watch Shakespearean adaptation. It received positive reviews, and it helped set up Leonardo DiCaprio as a heartthrob, something he would fully become with the release of 1997's Titanic. Looking back, October 1996 very much felt like the month that was letting moviegoers take a break from countless cinema trips. They likely appreciated that, considering what was to come in November. On November 8th, audiences got to see the premiere of Ransom, Ron Howard's action thriller that became the 7th highest-grossing film of the year, earning $309,492,681. The movie featured Mel Gibson, Rene Russo, Liev Schreiber, Evan Handler, and more. Gibson was praised for his performance, even earning a Golden Globe nomination. Interestingly, Ransom actually broke some records. Its opening weekend became the 3rd highest November opening weekend of all time, only beaten by Interview with the Vampire and Ace Ventura: When Nature Calls. Ransom had a lot of competition in November. On the 10th of the month, Space Jam came out, becoming the 10th highest-grossing film of the year. The film stars Michael Jordan, who actually plays an alternate version of himself, who has to help the Looney Tunes learn how to play basketball. The film received positive to mixed reviews, but most people agreed the clever combination of live action and animation was impressive and worked really well. 5 days after the premiere of Space Jam, on November 15th, another memorable movie came out, The English Patient, starring Ralph Fiennes, Kristen Scott Thomas, Willem Dafoe, and Colin Firth, was a romantic war drama that very much impressed the critics. The English Patient would go on to receive an overwhelming 12 Academy Award nominations the following year, winning 9 of them,
The English Patient.
English patient.
The English Patient.
English patient.
The English Patient.
including Best Picture, Best Director for Anthony Minghella, and Best Editing. But there was still more to come in November. On the 18th of the month, 101 Dalmatians came out and became the 6th highest-grossing movie of the year. This was one of the first live-action Disney remakes, and it really nailed it. In many ways, it became the blueprint for the modern remakes of classic Disney films. It also brought the old story to the forefront again, introducing 101 Dalmatians to a younger generation. Glenn Close's performance as Cruella de Vil in the movie was especially memorable. She was over the top and camp, but in the best way possible. To this day, she is considered the ultimate Cruella, as well as one of the best live-action Disney villains. It wasn't just the kids that had a good time in the second half of November, though. On November 27th, audiences were treated to not one, but 2 excellent films. The first was The Crucible, which was about the Salem witch trials. It starred Winona Ryder and Daniel Day-Lewis, and it portrayed themes of religious extremism and public fury. The second movie to come out on this day was Billy Bob Thornton's Sling Blade, which also dealt with heavy topics, including mental illness. The film launched Thornton into superstardom, and it ended up getting him Academy Award recognition. He won in the Best Adapted Screenplay category, and was also nominated for Best Actor. Many still consider Sling Blade to be the highlight of his career. November was a stacked month in terms of movie releases, and December was no different. Let's take a look at how this roller coaster of a year wrapped everything up. 1996 was a great year for Tom Cruise. Mission Impossible proved to be a huge success, but another one of his films also made it to the top 10 highest-grossing films of the year. Cameron Crowe's Jerry Maguire finished in 9th place, earning $273,552,592. This romantic comedy is known for its many memorable lines, including,
"You had me at hello."
You complete me.
The film wasn't just great for Tom Cruise, it also did wonders for Cuba Gooding Jr.'s career, as well as Renee Zellweger's career. Jerry Maguire even earned a couple of Oscar nominations,
Cuba Gooding Jr. and Jerry Maguire.
with Gooding Jr. winning for Best Supporting Actor. December 13th provided a little bit of a change of pace. Tim Burton's Mars Attack came out. At the time, it received mixed reviews, likely due to the fact that 1996 was the year of serious sci-fi movies. Mars Attacks was much more camp and used dark humor, which wasn't necessarily what people were looking for at the time. However, the star-studded cast this film had was, and still remains, extremely impressive. You had the likes of Jack Nicholson, Glenn Close, Michael J. Fox, Sarah Jessica Parker, Danny DeVito, and Pierce Brosnan all in one movie. Mars Attacks eventually became a cult classic, and it has many fans who swear by it even today. Just a day after Mars Attacks' premiere, on December 14th, we got treated to another iconic film. The musical Evita got its movie adaptation, and we got to see Madonna play the role of Eva Perón. The film also starred Jonathan Pryce and Antonio Banderas, and it received an Academy Award for Best Original Song. Interestingly, the song that won in that category was You Must Love Me, not the much more popular and well-known Don't Cry For Me Argentina. Tonally, December 1996 was all over the place. We got a tear-jerking musical, a campy sci-fi comedy, and a classic rom-com. But that's not all. On December 20th, we got treated to another classic.
Hello.
Hello.
Yes?
Scream pretty much changed the game when it came to the horror genre. By 1996, slashers weren't exactly popular. Most found them way too predictable and full of cliches. There was very little interest in movies like this, until Scream changed the game. This film wasn't afraid of leaning into the cliches, but instead of taking itself way too seriously, it used satire to win over the audience. Scream was a kind of meta film that managed to be smart, funny, and scary all at the same time. It quickly became popular, and it spawned a huge franchise that's still alive and well-known 30 years later. The final film of 1996 that we'll talk about is Kenneth Branagh's Hamlet. It came out on Christmas Day and starred Branagh himself. To this day, Hamlet is considered one of the best Shakespeare adaptations put to film. It's more than 4 hours long. but fans of Shakespeare will tell you that it's worth every second. The film was nominated for 4 Oscars, including Best Adapted Screenplay for Branagh. What's surprising is that despite the film's acclaim, it wasn't particularly successful at the box office. If you simply look at the numbers, it might seem like it bombed. However, the story is more complicated than that. Hamlet actually only received a very limited release, which is why it didn't earn as much as it possibly could have. Still, the film is considered a huge success by many, which just goes to show that money isn't always everything. What Branagh achieved with Hamlet was singular, and he deserves all the praise for it that he can get. And there you have it. We've arrived at the end of 1996 in cinema history. There's no doubt that this year was full of unprecedented ups and downs. It spawned several mega successful franchises, while also having one of the quietest, least impressive box office summers in a long time. 1996 ushered in an age of disaster films, daring adaptations, and satirical horror films. It showed us what can be done with special effects, especially in films like Twister and Independence Day. At the same time, the cracks in the Hollywood machine started showing this year. Nowadays, many people talk about the oversaturation of the cinema landscape. There are too many movies coming out every single week, and this huge number can easily put off more casual moviegoers from going to the cinema. It seems that this trend was slowly starting to build itself almost 30 years ago in 1996. Franchises were on the rise, and smaller movies could often be drowned out. However, the situation still wasn't that dire. Indie films especially left an impact this year, and we all know that there are many classics still to come in the years that follow. 1996 might have stumbled along the way, but in the end, there's no denying that it gave us some of the most memorable films of the decade.